Welcome everybody to today's live webinar, Improving Application Security and Performance with ECC SSL Offloading. On the agenda for today, we're going to kind of start at the beginning, start with the basics, and then work our way through to to today's topic of ECC SSL Offloading, and then talk a little bit about array solution for ECC SSL Offloading. So on the agenda, we're going to look at what is SSL offloading and what's the value that it provides. And because we're going to be talking about ECC SSL offloading, we need to provide the context for that, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what's a little bit more common today, which is the RSA cipher, and talk a little bit about the differences between RSA, SSL encryption and SSL offload, and ECC encryption and ECC SSL offload. After we provided that baseline and that context, then switch gears a little bit and begin to talk about Array's solution for ECC SSL offload. We had a recent product announcement with a new set of products that have been purpose-built for exactly this purpose, to provide ECC SSL offloading. So want to talk a little bit about those products and some of those specifications. And then, for those of you that may be in the need, may require ECC SSL offloading, I want to begin to look at our offering and also compare it against some of the other offerings in the market, right? So we'll look at Array versus the competition, and really articulate and build out why we provide superior value for SSL offloading versus some of the other choices you may have in the market. One of the very unique things that Array brings to the table is that you may be interested in ECC, you may have a future need for it, and after today's presentation, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what some of those reasons are why you may want to look at ECC for your SSL requirement and for SSL offloading. And what our solution allows you to do is you can buy a solution that has essentially market-leading performance and capabilities for RSA SSL offloading, and on the very same product, have the best on the market in terms of ECC SSL offloading. Both of those are on the same product, so you can buy a product that'll meet your requirements today, and then as your requirements evolve, and you can do this on your own terms and on your own timetable, you can evolve to ECC encryption, and you're not going to have to go and buy a new solution for that. You can just very seamlessly switch from one to the other. And so I want to, dig into that a little bit and explain how Array's products will allow you to do that. And after that, hopefully that we'll have a little bit of time for some questions and answers. So allow me to introduce myself. I'll be leading today's webinar and today's call. My name is Paul Anderson. I'm a Senior Director of Marketing here at Array Networks. And I talked a little bit about the question and answer session. So if you have questions along the way, what I encourage you to do, if I'm on a particular slide or I'm discussing a particular topic and you have a question, go ahead and enter that question into either the Q&A window in the WebEx platform or the chat window. And what I'll do, I won't answer that question right away, but what will happen is as we get to the end, we get to the Q&A session, I'll go back, I'll check all of those questions in the Q&A window, in the chat window, and I'll go ahead and begin to field those questions. And what that'll allow, too, is that, some of you may, as we get to the end, a question might come to mind, right? And that creates a perfect opportunity for, as I'm answering some of those questions that have been entered in along the way, give an opportunity for people to enter in any of those questions that they might have as we reach the end of today's webinar. So with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we get started, I always like to provide a little bit of context, right? We're going to talk about a specific topic right here, but as I look at the attendees we have on today's webinar, I see some familiar names, some Array customers, some Array partners, but I also see a fair number of people that, they're new, right? New people that are interested in this topic and may or may not be familiar with Array Networks. So I'm going to give a quick background and then we'll move on to the topic itself. About Array, so we are headquartered in North America, in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, in California, specifically in Milpitas, California. We are a good-sized organization. If you look at on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a thing that there says, the markets we serve, right? So, we serve North America market, China, Japan, India, European market, et cetera, right? So we have a good number of employees, but a significant local presence in North America, China, Japan, and India as well, to enable us to more effectively serve our customers in those areas. The technology, we have a very strong technology portfolio. The company has been in existence for over 10 years, and I'm going to give you some examples of this today. Obviously, I can't go into great detail on our full technology and intellectual property portfolio, but one of the things that does separate Array from some of the alternatives on the market is that we do have a strong technology and IP portfolio. And we'll go ahead and look at one or two aspects of that as we progress through the presentation today. Our focus as a company is virtualized application delivery and security. And what we mean by that is, we've been doing application delivery and security, SSL VPN, ADCs, load balancing. We've been doing that for a number of years, right? So this is our core expertise and, the core of our business, right? But what you're going to see if you go to our website and you view some of our other webinars is that, we have a new product. It's called the Network Functions Platform. And what we're aiming to do with that is there's a lot of people that are wanting to go the direction of virtualization and the direction of being more software-centric. And the reason being is that they want to be more agile and more flexible in their ability to deploy application delivery, security, and networking services. And so virtualization gives them this ability. Now, what we're finding is that, it doesn't solve every problem. You get some positives, but you also get some issues. And some of those issues are around performance. People are saying we like the agility, but, we sacrifice performance. Other things they're saying is that we like the agility, but it introduces a lot more complexity in enabling the solution as compared to the more simple appliances, right? And so we have a new line of products that's designed to give the flexibility of virtualization and enable that for app delivery, security, networking functions, but solving those issues of performance and those issues of complexity. So that's a topic for another webinar, and or if you're interested, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to discuss some of those new solutions, some of those more forward-looking solutions with you. But be that as it may, our focus today is application delivery and security, as well as virtualized application delivery and security. Touched a little bit on the products. The core product that's enabling that these solutions in the area of virtualization, multi-tenancy, et cetera, that's the product that we call the Network Functions Platform. The product that we're going to talk about today, that we're really going to focus on today, that's our application delivery controller product. This is the product that, if you need SSL offloading, this is the product that you're going to buy. And of course, we have other products in our portfolio as well, the Secure Access Gateway, the SSL VPN. This is a very strong product. We've been doing it for a long time. And I haven't listed them here, but there are some other capabilities in our product portfolio as well. The segments that we serve, traditionally, historically, last 10 years, we've built up, a pretty good size customer base in the enterprise, various verticals from finance to healthcare, e-commerce, things of that nature, and also, public sector type customers, the education, government, state and local government, federal, these kinds of things. And that's still a big piece of our business. But the piece that I also like to touch on a little bit is the service provider. We've talked about virtualization. We've talked about cloud. This is something that's come on very strong in the last 3 to 4 years, really picked up steam. And so a growing portion of our business is providing these types of solutions to a software as a service cloud provider, allowing them to scale a cloud-based application, or infrastructure as a service. Those cloud providers or MSPs that are wanting to sell load balancing as a service, VPN as a service, different application delivery and security as a service. Our products lend themselves very well to these types of customers who can then use this infrastructure to enable infrastructure as a service for their customers. So that's a big piece of a big and a growing piece of our overall business. And having been around for 10 plus years, we have amassed around the world at last count just over 5,000 worldwide customers. And some of which you can see at the bottom of this slide. There's a little bit of a North America slant to some of the customers that I'm highlighting here, and a few awards that we've won recently as well. So just a little bit of background about Array Networks. Obviously, if you're interested in some of those other products, some of the other solutions and topics that I mentioned, absolutely feel free to reach out to me and/or go ahead and contact us or reach out to your partner or your salesperson, and we'll be more than happy to discuss any of those topics. So with that said, we can go ahead and hop into today's topic. So what is SSL and where is it used? This is a little bit of back to basics probably for a number of people on the call, but I'd like to start at the beginning, provide the context, and then build to some of the more complex and some of the newer topics as we go along, and you'll be better able to kind of follow along and understand how it got to that place, right? So basically, if a URL starts with HTTPS or displays a lock symbol, the web page or the service is secured using SSL or Secure Socket Layer Protocol, right? So the SSL, it encrypts the data in transit, right? So it's creating an encrypted connection between a client and a server or an application. It doesn't have to, but commonly, SSL will ask for access credentials, right? So everybody's familiar with log into your Amazon Prime, username, password. Log into your social media, Facebook, username, password. Almost 100% of these types of activities are secured using SSL. How does SSL work? So SSL creates a secure connection between client browsers and servers located in the data center. Now, although SSL, it's encryption, right? So it's compute intensive. But although it's compute intensive, because that the client or the browser is really only establishing one connection, it's able to do this without too much trouble, right? The end user is not really going to experience too much problem. The end user device is not going to experience too much problem trying to take care of this task. Similarly, on the other side of the connection, if a server is only expected to support a handful of SSL connections, for whatever reason, it's an application that at most is going to have a couple of people connecting to it with a secured SSL connection, probably not going to have a problem, right? So yeah, if a server is only expected to support a handful of SSL connections, performance and scalability probably won't pose a concern. However, issues arise, however, when applications need to handle thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of concurrent SSL sessions. Well, what are examples of that? I named some on the previous slide, right? You have big social media properties, you have online banking, you have e-commerce, you have software as a service. I mean, these types of cloud-based services have to handle a tremendous volume of secure connections. So yeah, exactly. Examples include e-commerce, online banking, cloud services, social media, et cetera, et cetera. In these cases, it's best, rather than terminating the SSL connection on the server, in these cases, it's best to terminate the SSL connection on an appliance that's designed for the rigors of secure transaction processing, something that's designed to aggregate and grind through that high volume of secure transaction processing. And you can see there, I've got a little arrow pointing to it, the SSL appliance, and this in essence is the application delivery controller product, or the ADC. As I mentioned here, we'll talk a little bit more about that ADC product, right? So ADCs are the best and most common solution for SSL offloading. I can't really think of, when this is a requirement, I can't really think of a different product or an alternative product that people are using out there in the market for this purpose. If this is the situation you find yourself in, you need SSL offloading, you're going to be deploying an application delivery controller product. But the product, it does more than just SSL offloading. Although latest statistics from Gartner and from other research firms indicate that when an ADC is deployed, 90% of the time it's handling SSL, secure transaction processing, and SSL offload. So beyond just the SSL encryption, ADCs also perform additional functions that further optimize the performance of applications and servers. And what are some of those things? Well, the product, it started out as a load balancer, right, before it began to roll in some of these additional capabilities, right? So one of the primary functions of the ADC is to provide high availability for your servers, your websites, your applications, your cloud services. It provides server load balancing, link load balancing, DNS, global server load balancing, distributing loads and ensuring high availability, a primary function of the application delivery controller. Acceleration. So in addition to doing the SSL offload and SSL acceleration, it also does things such as connection multiplexing, caching, compression, other techniques that not just improve the performance of a server, but also accelerate and improve the performance of the applications that are behind the ADC. Security. It's a reverse proxy, right? So it provides, kind of a gap and a level of protection, even at that very beginning level. But you're also going to find things such as AAA, DDoS protection, web app firewall, and other security features built in to provide security at the application layer. And control. Layer 7 traffic management, traffic shaping, scripting, the ability to modify the behavior of the application so that it works as you try to deliver it to the end users that may be distributed, regionally, nationally, and globally, so on and so forth. So taking an application and making it so that it can function across a wide cross set of users. So that's a little bit of background and context of the product itself that's providing the SSL offload capability. Now let's talk about SSL and SSL offload itself. One of the things, just like compute power, just like anything else, security and the requirements for security, it never stands still, right? People introduce better security, and then the hackers come along and have more powerful tools at their disposal, more powerful techniques at their disposal, and they're able to crack and to break into whatever is the current security standard. Then we have to introduce new technologies, new security standards to try to get one step ahead of the hackers, and it's a bit of a cat and mouse, and it just kind of keeps going, never ending, right? So a perfect example of this in the context of SSL is that as recently as 2014, NIST, as well as the CA Browser Forum, mandated that the certificate authorities, or CAs, from 2014 forward, could only issue 2048-bit certificates, right? So essentially they're saying that the previous generation 1024-bit certificates no longer good enough, right? In most cases they might be good enough, but truth be told, if a hacker is intent on breaking into that connection, the likelihood is that they may be able to do that. We can't take that chance, and so from now on we have to use a more robust and a more secure SSL implementation. So from 2014 forward, everybody has to use 2048-bit certificates. So that being said, if you think about it, just like the jump from 1024-bit to 2048-bit encryption, it's only a matter of time, right, before somebody says, you know what, the 2048-bit encryption is not good enough either now, right? The hackers have gotten smarter. They've got better tools. They figured it out, right? And so, we can kind of see this coming. How long is it going to be before they put out another notice and says, you know what, only 4096-bit encryption now is what you're allowed to offer to customers in terms of certificates. So, while the increased security is a good thing, there's a trade-off. So let's take a look at that. And it's security versus performance. That's the trade-off, right? So 2048-bit encryption is more secure than 1024-bit encryption. However, it's also 5 times more compute intensive. Essentially, 5 times more computing power is consumed per each SSL transaction. So I have a little graphic here, right? You can see that yes, it's more secure, but it takes a lot more computational resources to grind the bigger ciphers to provide that level of security. And the ramifications of that are that if you look at, where you're doing or where you're doing that SSL offloading, I have a graphic here. If you were using, let's say, you weren't using an ADC and you were just using your server itself to provide, to provide the SSL encryption capability. If you had, let's say, a server that was able to do 1,500 transactions per second for a 1024-bit SSL encryption, and you were doing that, with 7 servers, right? Well, along comes the requirement to support the 2048-bit certificate. Well, how does that impact things? If you don't change your number of servers, well, you just went from supporting 1,500 transactions per second to supporting only 300 transactions per second, right? You just took a big hit. Conversely, if you wanted to continue to be able to support 1,500 transactions per second, you had to go from 7 servers to 35 servers, right? So either way, you're taking a big hit on performance and what you're able to support, or you're having to invest a lot more money to continue to be able to support what you require to support, for your business. And the same thing holds true. If you can clearly see here, as you look on the right-hand side of the table, that, an ADC that's purpose-built for SSL offloading, of course, it can handle a lot more than, a server could, right? But even there, an ADC that was able to do 25,000 transactions per second for 1024-bit encryption, with 2048-bit encryption, now it only does 5,000, right? If you had a device that did 200,000, now it only does 40,000. And we just saw from the previous slide that it's only a matter of time before, NIST or, the CAB forum comes out and says, nope, can't do 2048 anymore. We got to move to 4096. Okay, well, where you used to be doing 1,500 transactions per second, now you're doing 60. That's crazy, right? Or if you wanted to continue to do 1,500, you need 180 servers. It's crazy. And you'll see, it even has even as robust as an ADC is, which is purpose-built for SSL offloading, with 4096, you went from 25,000 TPS to 1,000 TPS, or from 200,000 down to 8,000. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? Is how many more times can we do this process? And it gets to be a little bit ridiculous. So what we need is a more efficient way to provide the same level of security, or the ability to provide a higher level of security in a much more efficient manner, if we're to be able to stay ahead of the threats, but also do so in a cost-effective manner that allows us to run our business. And so this is why there's increasing interest in ECC as opposed to the RSA SSL encryption that I've been showing here on this slide. So let's look at that, this comparison between RSA SSL encryption, which is, probably the bulk of what's being used today, and ECC encryption ciphers, which is what has been more recently introduced and is recently gaining traction for the reason that we're going to show here right now. So if you look at the security strength, right, the 1024-bit RSA encryption, right, that provided a security strength of 80 bits, right? And then we talked about, we can't use 1024 anymore, we have to go to 2048. And that provided a security strength of 112 bits, right? And then I talked about 4096, but in this case, we're going to look at 3072. This provided a security, 128-bit, security strength, right? Now, the interesting thing is that let's look at the ECDSA public key numbers that I have on the right there. These are the ECC encryption ciphers, right? And you'll see that for the same level of security, for instance, the 128-bit security, whereas that required a 3072-bit RSA key, it only requires a 256-bit ECC key. So this is allowing us now to reclaim and provide a much more efficient way to conduct SSL offloading one that that takes us out of that escalating cycle of, 5x, 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 that's either going to rob us of performance or make it so costly to support the number of connections we need that, that we can no longer do it. With ECC, you can see we can become much more efficient and be able to, cost effectively scale our requirement for SSL offloading and stay a step ahead of the threats that are out there. So it's for this reason that, we think that this is actually very compelling, right, is helping people make this switch. And so what we did is we made essentially a purpose-built product for ECC SSL offloading, and we call it AppVelocity-E. Okay, some of you on the call might be familiar with our nomenclature. AppVelocity, we have an AppVelocity-S, and then we have an AppVelocity-E, and obviously the E stands for ECC. So it's a purpose-built ADC engineered to deliver industry-leading performance for both RSA and ECC SSL offloading. So in addition to providing efficient ECC SSL TPS numbers, it also provides the raw horsepower needed to drive high volume throughput for encrypted traffic. This is something worth noting. One of the things that we see as we begin to introduce this concept to people is they say, oh wow, ECC is so much more efficient. Gosh, do I really need the ADC, right? Can I just go back to doing it on a server and save myself even more money? However, the truth is it's not that simple, right? Because, the transactions per second, that really refers to the authentication component of the overall SSL process, right? You got to authenticate and create that secure transaction to establish the connection. But once that secure connection is established, it's just the beginning, right? You have bulk throughput to worry about. You have the actual SSL encrypted traffic that you need to push over the internet and through the infrastructure that's connecting the client and the server, right? And so, yes, maybe you could do the authentication and the transaction more efficiently on a server, but the server is going to shut down very quickly once you try to do the bulk throughput of the encrypted traffic that you're going to need to be able to support. And so in order to do that effectively, you're still going to require that ADC, if you're in the business of supporting a high volume of secure transaction processing. So I mentioned that this product is purpose-built for ECC SSL offloading, and to that end, it incorporates the latest generation Cavium Nitrox 5 dedicated hardware for SSL encryption tasks. Some of the other differentiators of the product is that you've probably heard a lot about perfect forward secrecy, so we absolutely support that as part of our support for ECC. Generally what this means is that in the off chance, the very, very rare chance that somebody is able to crack security, it doesn't matter, right? There's no way for them to go back and have any visibility into any traffic or any information that was transmitted over this connection prior to the hacking of that connection, right? So even if somebody manages to break the secure connection, security is not compromised. Apple Transport Security, another key feature of our AppVelocity-E product, right? More and more people are accessing these secure websites, these secure applications, from mobile. And a large chunk of that mobile traffic, does come from the various Apple devices, iPhones, so on and so forth, the iOS operating system. And if you're going to provide encryption from those for those devices and support secure connections from those devices to applications and services, you need to support the Apple Transport Security Protocol. We do. One of the other differentiators, and we'll talk about this a little bit on the following slide, is the Array product portfolio far exceeds and outperforms the new I-Series products from F5, right? And following on that, well, F5 far outperformed the other competitors, right? So if you look at F5 for ECC, SSL offloading, and you compare it to A10 or Citrix, yeah, F5 I-series beats those other vendors hands down. Array beats F5, right? So, you know, having made a purpose-built appliance for ECC SSL offloading, at this point in time, you know, there's no higher performing product on the market for this solution than what's currently offered by Array Networks, and we'll look at that a little bit more in a little bit. And the third differentiator is that not only are we providing those market-leading ECC SSL offload performance metrics, but we also, on the same product, provide market-leading RSA SSL offloading metrics, right? So what does this mean? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you're interested in ECC, the time might not be right just yet. You know, path of least resistance, you want to be able to continue to use RSA for, you know, a period of time. Well, you can purchase an Array product, use the RSA, you know, encryption today, and then on your terms, when the time is right, you can make that switch to ECC encryption and ECC SSL offload, and you can do that on the same product. You don't have to buy a new product, don't have to do anything, just a very seamless migration from one to the other. So that idea of being future-proof is a third key differentiator for the product. And here's a set of graphs that just goes a little bit deeper into, you know, what I just mentioned was that our AppVelocity-E product outperforms F5, and F5 outperforms the remainder of the competition, right? And a lot of that is due to, for whatever reason, F5 decided to use FPGAs on their I-series. It does give them a little bit of flexibility. You know, they can tweak and tune that FPGA to do, you know, maybe a couple different things down the road. But as compared to Array's the Cavium, the Nitrox 5, the hardware SSL acceleration that we incorporate into the AppVelocity-E, it just simply can't keep up in terms of the raw horsepower that we're able to provide on our product, right? So comparing apples to apples, you know, I'm picking kind of a high mid-range product here. I'm comparing their i7800 to the Array APV7600. You know, the F5, you can see it supports 27,000 transactions per second for ECC with 20 gig throughput, and that's reflected in the charts. And these charts come from F5. They're lifted out of publicly available F5 testing documents, right? So I'm using their documentation to make these points. So compared to that, the Array 7600 supports 38,000 ECC SSL TPS and 30 gig of throughput. So you can see that the Array product outperforms the F5 product, and just very visually you can see that the F5 product outperforms the remainder of the competition. As I say, Array leads F5, F5 leads the rest. And a kind of a final differentiator, you know, outside of performance, outside of cost effectiveness, outside of future-proof, is just security, right? I talked, when we first opened up the webinar, I talked about the technology portfolio, the intellectual property portfolio that Array has, that we develop a lot of our own technology. And our SSL stack is one example of that, right? Many other vendors rely on OpenSSL for handling their production traffic, right? And OpenSSL, well, you know, probably the most prominent vulnerability that you know, we've heard of over the last, you know, few years was Heartbleed, right? But there have been others, Drown, Ghost, Bash, Shellshock, other vulnerabilities. And these are all vulnerabilities associated with OpenSSL. And each time one of these things pops up, right, everybody scrambles. You know, I got to scramble to patch my server. I got to scramble to patch my ADC. You know, ADCs have different operating systems. Which patch is going which operating? It's a hassle, okay? The point being here is that because Array develops its own proprietary SSL stack, not only can we generate the kind of performance that I talked about on the previous slide, but we can provide a higher level of security as well for SSL. So case in point, all those vulnerabilities, Heartbleed, Bash, Shellshock, Ghost, Drown, others, Array has not been vulnerable. We've been immune to all those vulnerabilities, and none of our customers have had to do any sort of patching, have had to run around, do any of that kind of stuff when these things pop up. So, you know, better performance, better cost efficiency, future-proof, higher security, all these things, you know, really add up to providing a strong value proposition for using Array products for SSL offloading. These are the models. These are the 4 new models that we introduced in the AppVelocity-E product line. So, we have a quote entry level, but I mean, our entry level is pretty powerful, right? But we have our entry level, the 3600, kind of like lower mid, 7600, higher mid, and the 11600, our high end there, right? So you can see on the AppVelocity-E 7600, this is the one where F5, I think, supported 27,000 ECC transactions per second, and this is the one where you can see that Array is supporting the 38,000 ECC TPS, right? But we have a product even higher than that. If you look at the 11600, which compares, favorably to a higher end F5, on this one, we go all the way up to 76,000 ECC SSL transactions per second. So strong product line from, the low end through the mid through to the high end. And now I'm going to get really granular. Well, I'm not going to go line by line here, but I'm going to highlight, for each product, I'm going to highlight a few items in a table, right? So I talked about our 26, our 36, our 76, and our 11600. And I have a slide for each. I got a table for each, and it's really going to allow you to see just how the product stacks up against an F5 product that's of a similar class of product, right? So in this case, we're looking at the APV2600, and comparable to an F5, I26, I2800. And you can see, even for things like the layer 4, layer 7 throughput, the SSL throughput, we beat them, right? But where things get really interesting is where you start looking at the SSL encryption and the SSL transactions per second. Whether it's RSA or ECC SSL offload, you can see there that we're getting 365% better performance, 300% better performance, and really pulling away from the F5 products. Looking at the 3600, the next product in the line, it's very similar, right? You're looking at the layer 4, layer 7 throughput, the SSL throughput. We provide those superior metrics. But once again, you get to the SSL transactions per second, the ECC transactions per second. This is where we really start to pull away, from the F5 product line. Moving to the 7600, it follows a very familiar pattern. Now, what you're going to notice as we move into the 76 and the 11600 products is now you're getting into the higher end, right? It's going to be very, very difficult to do 300% better or 400% better. But as you can see here, something that's for ECC SSL transactions per second versus the F5 product, we're delivering 50% more transactions per second, right? And if you think when we're talking about these high-end products, that means, if vendor A did 100, we're doing 150. That's 50,000 more, so it's significant, right? And finally, looking at the AppVelocity-E, the 11600 versus the F5 I-series, again, holding our own on the layer 4, layer 7 throughput, SSL throughput, again, much higher. And for the SSL TPS, whether for RSA or for ECC SSL offloading, again, you're going to see that big advantage for the Array product versus the F5 product. And so I want to summarize that, right? So that's outright performance that we just talked about. But I want to talk about price performance too, affordability, value, right? So the APV2600, price matches with the I2800, right? Plus or minus, they're about the same price. But we deliver 4 times greater ECC SSL transactions per second. The 3600 price matches with, let's say, a 4800, I4800, right? But you're getting 3 times greater ECC SSL transactions per second. APV 7600 price matching with an I7800, but again, 50% more, and very similarly with the 11600 versus the F5 I10800, again, delivering 50% more ECC SSL transactions per second. So best outright performance, best price performance, best affordability. And just to summarize this, right, to bring it all home, I think I've tried to touch on these 4 core points and kind of repeat them throughout the presentation, and kind of wrap things up, just reiterate them one more time, right? So the best performance, so highest performance, ECC SSL transactions per second and throughput on the market, outperforms F5, A10, Citrix, etc. Most affordable, product for product, consistently delivers more performance for less cost. Future-proof, use RSA encryption today, transition to ECC encryption when the time is right, without extra cost, and least vulnerable, right? Proprietary SSL stack that's immune to heartbleed and some of those other vulnerabilities that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So that's the bulk of today's webinar. Before we move to the Q&A, one thing I do want to mention is that for people that attended the webinar today, we have some very compelling Q3 incentive programs. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of the dollars, amounts, and the percentages. Just know that as we talked about already in the presentation, without any kind of promotions or incentives, the products are already delivering tremendous price performance and value compared to some of the other options on the market. So we're building on that with incentive programs that give you even better pricing and even more compelling offers to get into the array of products, right? And what's a good opportunity to do that? Well, we all know that there are certain F5 products that are end of life, and many, many customers are looking to replace those products and having to pick what's the best option for them, right? That's one thing. The other thing would be new projects, right? New projects, new cloud services, new services that need to support a large volume of users. You know, start looking at new options, right, that are going to give you better performance, that are going to give you better cost efficiency, drive down the cost of this type of networking solutions, right? So for those that contact us between now and the end of the quarter, which I think is what, you know, we're on a standard schedule for, you know, so about a month's time frame. For those that reach out and start a POC within that time window, you do make yourself available for some of these compelling incentives and programs that we have available. So if that's something that, you know, the timing is right and you want to begin to look at that, one of our solutions in the next month or so, yeah, please reach out to us, and that'll kind of lock you in. Hey, I was on the webinar, I heard about these programs. It'll lock you into some of these incentives. And so with that, yeah, that's the presentation proper. And so I'm going to escape out of this and check my Q&A window and see what kind of questions we might have here. Bear with me just one moment as I pull it up. So a few questions here that are just, I see some people have asked some very similar questions. So I'll go ahead and kind of answer those and take care of those first. So yeah, so things such as, you know, today's presentation, recordings, things of that nature, right? So generally what we do for our webinars is directly after the webinar, within the next say an hour or so, everybody that, whether you registered or you registered and attended, everybody that either registered or attended for today's webinar receives a PDF copy of this, the presentation that we used on today's webinar, right? So if you have colleagues that were interested but couldn't make it, or you saw something here that was interesting you want to share either with a colleague or with management, yeah, we're going to go ahead and make that available. Similarly, within a few days, we generally edit and we will post the webinar to our YouTube page, which you can either go to youtube.com/ArrayTV, or just go to YouTube/ and search for Array Networks. You're going to find there. I mentioned earlier that we have some of these products like our network functions platform and some of the products we're introducing that solve challenges around virtualization and things of that nature, right? All those webinars and all that information is on that YouTube page. So, you know, if you want to see this presentation or share it with, you know, a colleague, you're going to be able to find it there in a couple days, but you're also going to be able to find webinars and videos on some of the other topics that I mentioned on the webinar today. There are some questions around, you know, trying the product, right? So this is one of those things where, you know, we talked a lot about something that's very compute intensive and very hardware intensive today, right? Using a dedicated physical appliance with purpose-built hardware components to offload SSL, which is very compute intensive, from the server, et cetera, right? So, you know, it's very hard to kind of download a purpose-built appliance and trial it, right? So, you know, if you really want to get into the testing of, you know, the product for the purpose of SSL offload, yeah, you're probably going to, want to start a POC at some point in time, right? That being said, if you're new to, array networks, load balancers, application delivery controllers, things of that nature, and you simply want to begin to familiarize yourself with the product itself, log into the administrator interface, look at the various ADC features, how easy is it to use, things of that nature, that you can absolutely begin to do very easily. You can go to our website. On the home page, there's going to be a button in the upper right that says how to try. There's a center of the page, there's a big graphic that says try array today. Click on those and you'll be on our download center and you'll be able to download a free 30-day trial version of any of our products, right? Whether that be our ADC product, the virtual ADC, or a virtual SSL VPN, or a virtual WAN optimization controller. You'll have access to all of that. And so that's one way that you can begin to familiarize yourself with the array product line. Okay. Question on the promotion that I mentioned and the incentives that I mentioned at the end. So the question is, hey, what if I have a Citrix NetScaler? And I'm just going to broaden that. So, if you happen to have, I mentioned F5 quite a bit. They were mentioned quite a bit on today's call. We see them out there in the market a lot, right? But if you do happen to have a Citrix, an A10, Radware, something else, and you like what you saw in today's presentation, yes, we have been authorized to extend some of those promotions and incentives to, replacing, competing products besides just F5. So if you have one of those, absolutely go ahead and reach out to us, and we will be able to help you. More detailed question here. Sorry if I missed it. Do you have something that's the equivalent of F5's Global Traffic Manager? If so, is it included, priced separately, et cetera? Yes, we do. So we have a very robust global server load balancing capability, and it is it's a separate price. It's a small incremental price above that of the ADC, and of course we do that for people that hey, if you're using an ADC for local traffic management, sitting in front of the server, that's a little bit different than, where I may deploy it for global traffic management, global server load balancing, things of that nature, right? So for people who don't need that and aren't using it for that purpose, we don't make them buy it, right? So we're able to provide, the best price to everybody. If you need that, you can absolutely get it, and it's a small incremental pricing. All right, this is a good one, actually. So one of the biggest challenges I've seen with customers and switching over to, this is obviously a partner here, competitive product, even if it has a compelling price point, is the learning curve or for the support staff, or the complexity of trying to go from one solution to another. And can you talk about that a little bit? And this is a great opportunity to talk about something that I talked about with a Gartner analyst just the other day, right? So one of the things that our sales guys, have run into is people like this value proposition that we've articulated today, but they'll say, I'm running F5 and I'm running a lot of I rules. It's very complex, and it scares me to think about trying to figure out how to go from a setting and a configuration that's working very well today to going to a different solution, and how do I make sure that I don't break something in the process of, like, I like all these things you've told me, I want to buy into that, but I have to be able to do this. I have to be able to know how to do this, and I have to be able to do it without breaking things, right? So one of the very interesting things was that a lot of these I rules and things of that nature were actually implemented a fair while ago, and the truth is that even F5 has since collapsed a lot of those I rules into something as simple as a radio button, right? They have whatever it is, iApp or something, and templates and radio buttons and things of this nature. And the truth is, if you sit down and look at an F5 configured with I rules, many times you can start just eliminating those I rules very easily and replacing them with F5 radio buttons, right? Greatly streamlining the configuration. Well, now it's not a very big step, because Array has been doing these simplifications and radio buttons for common ADC configurations. We've been doing those for years, right? And so now it becomes not how do I map these I rules to array radio buttons and simplified configurations. It's like, no, okay, I got a radio button on the F5, I got a radio button on the array. Click, click, right? And so we can greatly diminish a lot of that complexity and really streamline and simplify things. And then you can very clearly see that, you know what, moving over is not as big of a deal, you know, as we might think it is. Yeah, there might be one or two things that we need to look at, but we have something called ePolicy, right, which is our scripting facility. And, you know, once we get down to the few things that we need to nail, yeah, we can do that with our ePolicy, you know, and we can make this thing happen. So that's actually a fantastic question. Let me see here. All right, so I think I've answered all the questions that we had here today. If you have additional questions after the webinar, absolutely feel free to reach out to me and or, you know, go to our website, call us, contact us. We'll be more than happy to contact one of our partners, contact your sales rep. We'll be more than happy to talk about the products, the solutions, other products, the incentives, any and all of the above. More than happy to have those discussions. So that being said, I want to thank all of our customers, partners, all the new folks that join us today. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, and hope to see you on a future webinar. Thank you, everybody.